Deluzio, Western Pennsylvania, veteran, voting rights lawyer, union organizer, and my current job and great honor is representing the good people of Pennsylvania's 17th district in Congress. Thank you to the New Pennsylvania Project, One Hood.
We'll play it a little later. So I will bring up your moderator for this evening, Kadita Kenner. She is the CEO of the New Pennsylvania Project and the New PA Project Education Fund. Give it up.
Thank you. All right, how's everybody doing? How are we doing tonight? All right, good. All right, so as Khalif mentioned, my name is Kadita Kenner. I'm the founding CEO of the New Pennsylvania Project. The New Pennsylvania Project, we're a voting rights organization. We were founded in May of 2021. It's our purpose to expand the electorate so it matches the demographics of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And in the last 18 months, we have registered 30,000 Pennsylvanians to vote. Nice big number, we like that number. And so I have an illustrious panel with us tonight. They'll get to introduce themselves and talk about the organizations that they're here representing as well. And I want to thank the folks here on my right who are doing the ASL interpretation. So if anyone needs that assistance, they are here this evening. Feel free to move up and be with us here. It's a smaller, intimate group, I like to call it. And so we're going to have a really good conversation today. We're going to turn a town hall into a community conversation. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities for you all to ask all of the questions you may have ever had about the federal judiciary. So we're going to get right into it. And in the background, you're going to see some amazing pictures of advocacy work from various organizations, some represented in this room today, who have done incredible work to ensure that agency happens and that we are able to build power within our communities, that we are able to expand democracy and make it realized for all. And so in the background, you'll see some amazing pictures, particularly around the time in which Justice Jackson was being confirmed to be the first Black woman Supreme Court Justice of the United States of America. And I know that that was a very important moment for so many of us. Myself in particular, when you have a name like Kadita, you love to hear a name like Ketanji being put forward to the most powerful bench in the world. And so tonight we're going to just talk a little bit about the federal judiciary. And so I want to quickly level set the room here for this evening. And it's a smaller group, so you know what, let's do a quick shout out and see where you all are from. What part of the city are you from, or the suburbs are you from? And I'm going to start all the way back in the blue here. That's you. Mm-hmm.
Neville Island.
Say it again.
Neville Island.
Neville Island. Thank you for being with us today.
Essenwall.
Okay. All three?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Squirrel Hill.
Squirrel Hill. All right. Where are you joining us from today? I'm looking right here. DC. DC.
Wilkinsburg.
Wilkinsburg, right here in the house. Okay. Allegheny County, yes, represent. Hazelwood. Where are you joining us from this evening? Knoxville. Like Tennessee, Knoxville, but in this area.
It's a neighborhood on the south side.
On the south side of Pittsburgh, okay. Where are you joining us from this evening?
Swissvale.
Swissvale, not far. Brentwood, not far, yeah.
East End.
East End, thank you for being with us.
East Hills.
East Hills, all right. And then we got our folks back here manning some work that we're doing here to live stream this event. So it's gonna be so nice, you're gonna wanna watch it twice, and you'll be able to do that later. And our ASL interpreters this evening, we have Nevaeh, Cheyenne, and Joe. So thanking them for being with us tonight. So yes, so let's get right into this. I'm gonna call it the nitty gritty of getting into this. So let's level set here for a second. What just happened in November 7th, here in Pittsburgh and across the Commonwealth? What happened on November 7th? It was election day. And on election day in Pennsylvania, it was our judicial, local, and municipal election. And who did you get to vote for?
Sarah Ann Morano.
You got to vote for Sarah Ann Morano for county executive.
Judges.
You got to vote for judges, absolutely. Pennsylvania, one of only 7 states in the entire country where we get to vote for every single one of our judges in a partisan election. That makes us very rare, and it makes us very special, and it makes us very powerful. as the electorate. And we had an awesome election. No drama, no shenanigans. It was free and fair, and the outcomes are real. And in Pennsylvania, like I said, we got to vote for 4 appellate court or intermediate appellate court judges and justices. In Pennsylvania, we got to vote for the Superior Court, two judges on the Superior Court. We got to vote for 1 judge on the Commonwealth and 1 on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So that is something that we were able to do as Pennsylvanians. But tonight, we're talking about the federal judiciary. And we don't get to vote for the federal judicial judges or justices as individuals, but we do get to vote for the US senators who confirm them, or may nominate them, or know who they are, and the US representatives as well. And so I want to kick it off tonight by introducing Lena Swarnstein. And yes, and please introduce yourself, your organization, and give us an idea for those that may be newer and in the room about learning about the federal judiciary. How does a judge become a judge? What is the process?
Well, thank you so much, Kadita, and really a warm thank you to all of you for braving the cold and coming out tonight to join us. This is something I know all of us are deeply passionate about, and just really, really looking forward to the conversation we're going to have tonight. But as Kadita said, we're going to be focusing on the federal judiciary, and I'm with the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, which is more than 70 years old, in the nation's largest civil rights coalition that has brought together so many organizations across the years to pass monumental civil rights legislation. But ever since the beginning of even the organization and this giant coalition, we have understood the power of the courts. We can get civil rights acts that whether that is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Americans with Disability Act, or any other types of legislation passed. But the way our system is set and our government is set up, they're only going to survive if the courts actually uphold them, follow through them, it's implemented, and that people can actually, for example, if they are discriminated against, seek redress in the court. So, as Khalif mentioned at the top, our federal judiciary is really seen as the guardian of the Constitution and our federal laws. But you need a place to be able to go to actually feel like those laws have any influence over your life. And they do, even if you never enter a courthouse. These federal courts are ruling on issues, whether that is about equal pay, where you get to vote, do you get to vote, do you get to stay in the country? Do you have access to critical health care? Do your children have a place to go to school, and what kind of schooling is it? It literally impacts so much of what we do, from whether or not we're able to have clean water, clean air, to something very personal. If you are ever impacted because you have been charged with, or a close family member, or someone you just know is charged with a federal crime, it is a very intricate system to go through. So you may never, or someone you might know may never go through the entire court system, but it does impact you day in, day out. So who we have in our federal courts and who's serving as those judges is critically important. As Kadita mentioned, the state court levels, there's different layers, and the same is true for federal courts. We're really going to be focusing on these judges that are lifetime judges. So there are other federal judges, there are bankruptcy judges and magistrate judges that serve for terms of years, but what we're really going to focus on are these really powerful judges that serve for what the Constitution says is during good behavior, which means these days for life. When the Constitution was written, people are not living as long, these judges wouldn't have been serving as long, they weren't necessarily also facing the complexity of the society that we have, but we're still inherited this lifetime system. So who really becomes a judge is really critical. Similar to the state and local courts, or the Commonwealth courts, sorry, I don't mean to be so state-centric, I know you're a Commonwealth. there are trial level courts, and there's a lot more of them across the country because it is the place where if you need to go to court, you're most likely going to have your case litigated first and foremost in the district court, and that's where judges all across the country are deciding the facts of the case. They're listening to everything. And there are 677 district court judges all across the country divided up in 94 districts. 3 of those districts are here in Pennsylvania. We are currently sitting in the Western District, but there is also the Middle District of Pennsylvania and the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. So if you have a case, or you know someone who has a case, and you don't like the decision that the district court judge had, you would appeal it to that intermediate court, which we call the U.S. Court of Appeals. And Pennsylvania is part of a regional system. All of them, pretty much almost all of them, are regional or geographically based. And the Third Circuit. So that covers Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and U.S. Virgin Islands. And so there are going to be judges from all those different jurisdictions who could sit on that appeals. If you don't like the decision there, you can go to the Supreme Court, and we know there are only 9 justices there, one of whom we're really excited about, who Khadija mentioned, where we most recently, I want to hold on to this joy because sometimes we don't have enough of it, and it is what helps fuel us, but Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson being confirmed not only as the first Black woman to the U.S. Supreme Court, but also the first public defender on the Supreme Court. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute because having someone with that type of experience on our nation's highest court, from her lived experience, her professional experience, I'm having goosebumps just talking about it, it makes a difference because people understand, having people who understand how the law is lived and how people interact with the law in the entire system is absolutely vital. So getting to how a judge becomes a judge. So as Khadija mentioned, y'all don't get to elect these people. It's not quite the same self-selection crew either, where you just say, well, I'm going to put myself up into an election and volunteer for this position, which has its own challenges and pros and cons for sure. But we have, based on the Constitution, a system where the president gets to nominate, but U.S. senators have what's called advice and consent. How is this operationalized, though? So I'm really going to focus mostly on Pennsylvania. For a long time, Senator Casey has been one of your senators, and he worked with the previous senator to create a bipartisan commission to say, you know what, we're going to make recommendations to the president, but we're going to do it in a fashion where it's not just coming from me. I'm going to have members of this committee who are going to help me evaluate who's going to become a judge, and then they, amongst themselves, former Senator Toomey and Senator Casey, would come up with a conclusion. We now have U.S. Senator John Fetterman joining Senator Casey, and they have now reconvened a different but similar style of, hey, we are going to have people from the legal community and the community itself help us evaluate, help us recruit people. So right now there's actually an open application process for both the Eastern District and Middle District. There are 2 vacancies there, we'll talk more about that, where you can apply to become a judge. Those folks would then be interviewed by that commission. The senators then get to interview them, and then the senators, for especially those district court positions, then get to make recommendations to the president. Then the president makes that appointment. After that, it goes to the Senate Judiciary Committee, where right now there is no senator from Pennsylvania on that committee, but obviously that is a place where your senators are still going to have to evaluate every candidate that comes out of that committee, because once that committee has a hearing where we get to hear from the nominee themselves, they answer questions both in a hearing as well as in writing. It goes to the full Senate, where then all senators will be voting on that nominee. And as my good friend and colleague Cedric Lawson, who's here in the audience with us, always reminds us, every single U.S. judge that is here for a lifetime appointment is voted on by every single U.S. senator. So you're not voting on them, but you are voting for those senators who vote on every single one of those lifetime judges. So it matters significantly who is a senator in terms of who's making the nominations, but then also who's doing the confirming. It's a little bit different for the circuits in Supreme Court because there's more stakeholders involved in that process, but it's still very similar in terms of generating names of folks who are in the community, and then also making sure that they rise to the level of the president being able to evaluate and make the appointment and then go into the full Senate.
All right, did you all get that? Because there's a quiz at the end. All right. You know, I've been traveling the state for almost 7 years now, talking about the importance of the federal courts. And it's not the sexiest subject in the world, right? And I usually wear something a little off the shoulder, but it's kind of cold out there today, so I didn't do that. But we do have to make this topic sexy for all of us because of the importance that these judges and justices have over our daily lives. And so I want to introduce you to Monica Ruiz, who also joined us on the panel. Welcome, Monica. I would love for Monica to introduce yourself and your organization. But Monica, I really want to hear from you tonight. You know, you're doing a lot of work in the community, you've been doing it for a long time. And this is not the easiest thing to break down to someone who's lived here all their life, or someone who's new to the country, or new to the electorate. What do you feel is the issue that is most concerning to the community that you center and whose agency you are looking to uplift?
Thank you. So my name is Monica Ruiz. I'm the executive director of Casa San Jose. We're a nonprofit organization located in the South Hills as well. Roy is kind of my neighbor. So glad to see you over here, over the river and through the tunnels. And we work primarily with recent arrivals from their home countries, from Mexico, Central and South America. Mostly Spanish-speaking countries, because our staff is bilingual and we can communicate best that way. Gus has been around for 10 years. We just had our 10-year anniversary this year. Yay! The Latino population has grown over 80% in the last 10 years in this county. And so even though we are still only 3% of the population, which is very low compared to other major cities, we are a population that is here to stay and we're growing. So I think that it's really important to have our voice represented, kind of going off of what you were saying, with the people that we elect, so that our interests are front of mind when decisions are being made. So it is complicated. It's very complicated. It's hard to tell people that there's elections every year, because most people are like, no, it's only every 4 years. Or like, well, what president am I going to vote for? And I'm like, well, that's not this year, but you know. So there's that. We run into not understanding the system here. We run into many times language barriers. Our ballots here are only in English. And so we have a lot of folks from all over the world that are coming here to Pittsburgh and making Pittsburgh their home and are unable to read the ballots. And then there are different folks coming from different countries where things are done very differently than they are here. People are not encouraged to engage in elections. People could die. Presidents have been killed. People that were running for, certain offices have been killed while they were running for their offices. So it's really different. And so we try to encourage people to get involved and stay involved. So vote often, vote early, because anything can happen. It can snow, but we really want to make sure that people are making the best decisions for themselves and making sure that they're getting to the polls. So we do a lot of voter registration. We give rides to the polls. We do all kinds of things to make sure that people, especially folks in our community, are getting engaged and staying engaged.
Thank you for your work. Yeah. All right, I'm going to introduce a co-host of this evening's event. And so Miracle Jones of One Hood Your Power today, One Hood Power today. And obviously you all know One Hood, right? Give it up for One Hood. We're in your hood today. I got to know Miracle for some time now, kind of in this work, and she's a lawyer, so give it up. I like to, that's a lot of time and effort, so I like to give that up too. And, Miracle, I know you all are doing tremendous work here in Pittsburgh, and I've watched your organization grow, and I've seen you morph into all the things that you are doing, and it's just nice to have another organization that will talk about the courts out loud. And, Miracle, we're coming off of an election that, for a judicial election, where an issue was abortion access was a huge issue in that election. And we're talking about all the things that are happening right now on the United States Supreme Court and the decisions that have been overturned and could possibly be overturned. So can you tell us a little bit about how this will impact the communities that your organization serves? If there is, if we start to overturn what we think to be precedent, what does that mean for the communities here in Pittsburgh?
I think first of all, it means that we can't be in spaces like this. I think a lot of times people forget that the majority of our rights come from the federal bench. The right to marry, the right to, end segregation, the right to travel, all of this stuff comes from the federal bench. And you mentioned the election on November 7th, but since that time, we've had a couple of circuits in, my home state of Georgia, basically, last week ruled that there were going to be statewide elections that we know are going to hurt Black people and not allow for competitive Democratic races. We also, I think all of us, cried a little bit. I think it was 11th Circuit that was said that unless you're the federal government, you cannot bring voting civil rights claims and sue states who are violating the voting rights law. And so what that means is, a power, the Conference of Human Rights, New Pennsylvania Project can no longer sue if we were in, middle America, if our clients were kicked off the ballot, if, every election somebody's ballot is messed up. We know people forget to sign the back of their ballots, people, things happen, and the ACLU of Pennsylvania won a really good ruling just the other week, and it was basically if your mail-in ballot is on time and it's collected, it gets counted. That could change. We are looking at the likelihood of people using the federal bench to take away people's rights, to look at interracial marriage, to look at gay marriage, to look at adoption, and it's not just abortion access. A lot of times people think that, it's just one issue. That's not my issue, so I don't care. But here in Pennsylvania was the first state, Commonwealth, that said, if you're a drug dealer, you get hit with a RICO. Did y'all know that? That started here in Pennsylvania. So while we're all, glued to our TVs watching the Young Thug trial, that started here in Pennsylvania. That was a federal precedent that was set. And how many Black people have been impacted by that ruling? How many Black families have been torn apart because of that ruling? How many Black communities and neighborhoods still to this day are impacted because of that? Because a judge said, this is now a federal crime, and we're now under a federal jurisdiction. And so when we're looking at the federal level, we also have to remember that that precedent isn't just a change of law. For people who are going through those criminal procedures, it's triple time. Like, you can get arrested and the city of Pittsburgh commit a little crime, and you may get probation, you may get 6 months. You go to the feds, you can automatically, first case, get 5 years. When I was interning with the federal public defenders here, we have mandatory minimums on the federal level. Drugs, 5 years. Drugs and guns, 10 years. Automatically, we're talking about people 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, first arrest, looking at 5, 10, 15 years in prison. And so even if you are not someone who's motivated by the criminal justice system, even if you're someone who's not motivated to get involved because you don't believe your rights are on the line, the way this impacts our community is very unique, and the way this will have an impact on all of our communities is going to be very unique. And I think this is maybe the first time since the 1940s where we woke up and had less rights than we had 5 years ago and 10 years ago. And this is the first time when we don't even know if our children or grandchildren are going to have the same rights that we have. And that is why these elections are so important, because a lot of times these judges will say, well, I shouldn't be concerned about the impact of my vote. Well, the impact of your vote is going to determine if somebody lives or dies. It's going to determine if someone is a citizen or not. There was a story, people have been talking about finding out that they weren't citizens. The Dreamers still have not had a resolution to their citizenship pathways, and it's been over 10 years because of the federal courts. And so this is, again, is something that impacts us all in unique ways, but it has a lifetime of consequences.
Thank you for that, Miracle. You just mentioned that it's, none of our organizations here are here to tell you who to vote for, right? We're not going to do that tonight. That's not what we're here to do. But it is important for you to recognize that it is our United States senators who will make these decisions about who are these judges that sit on the bench for a lifetime. So I have a couple of statements I want to read for you from two of our U.S. senators, both of our senators here out of Pennsylvania, who couldn't be here this evening, but they thought this topic to be very important, and so drafted statements for me to read to you tonight. So I'll read the first one from U.S. Senator Bob Casey. And he said that all Americans have a constitutional right to equal protection and fair treatment under the law. To guarantee that right and to advance civil rights for generations to come, we must commit to elevating judicial candidates who reflect the nation they serve and who possess the necessary experience, character, and temperament for lifetime appointments to the federal judiciary. I have long worked on a bipartisan basis to confirm diverse, well-qualified candidates to fulfill the highest calling to administer equal justice under the law. And that's from U.S. Senator Bob Casey. And so, Lena, I want to get back to you, right? Because Senator Bob Casey, just in his statement, said that he's been really working to put well-qualified candidates on the bench. And I think about perhaps the lack of trust that people have in this moment for our judiciary, the state judiciary maybe, the federal judiciary definitely. And so when we think about the ethics and having an ethical Supreme Court, tell us your thoughts about what that means. What does it mean to have an ethical Supreme Court and ethical justices, and the recent decision that came out that, or whatever that thing was they passed that really doesn't mean too much. Tell us about that.
Well, so first and foremost, I do think, Senator Casey is right to say we need to find people for these lifetime appointments that have the temperament and the character for this. And that does, hopefully mean that the people that are getting these lifetime positions are holding themselves to a high standard of ethics. For district court and circuit court judges, there is a code of conduct. There are enforcement mechanisms, so if somebody challenges something that they've done, or if there is a reason for them to recuse themselves, which is a way for a judge to say, I can't listen to that because I know somebody in this, or there's a financial interest in this for me, they would recuse themselves. And there's much stronger transparency mechanisms that can be stronger. I'm not saying it's good enough, and there are some bills out there that we are trying to make sure do see some light of day, hopefully, and actually pass, so that we can hold these folks, especially these people who have lifetime appointments, accountable if need be, or we at least have more information. Because it's really important to note that these lifetime appointments mean that there really isn't a way to get rid of them. The way to fire a lifetime judge or a federal judge is to go through the impeachment process, which we've recently gone through with a former president of ours, and we know how hard that is. And that has only happened a handful of times for federal judges. So with that, it really does become important for judges themselves to take this role as protector of the rule of law seriously, so some level of humility is really important. But we right now have 9 justices who do not have an enforceable U.S. code of conduct for them to follow. You've heard probably about the escalating crisis at the court. So to bury the lead, you've probably heard about Justice Thomas and his extravagant vacations that he has taken with a billionaire benefactor, basically, where his nephew's private school has been paid for. He's had an RV, a very luxury RV paid for. Justice Alito has taken a very extravagant vacation to Alaska with other billionaires. It's a lot. Now, we have known that there is a very concerted effort. The reason why we are right now fighting for rights to get back, rights that we didn't even have, we had 3 years ago even, but don't now, is because there's a really concerted effort to roll back the progress of the civil rights movement, to roll back the progress that was made after desegregation in our public schools. Very intentional. And a lot of this goes to a lot of corporate wealth and powerful interests. And these are very similar to the types of powerful interests that are buying a lot of our Supreme Court justices' vacations and RVs and families' educations, etc. But right now there is not a mechanism, clearly even if there was, and there are some rules that the justices say that they follow, where some of this has not been reported. So it's not even able to, we're not even able to find out about this, but then we're finding out that there's some misconduct. There's other things that are sort of questionable, like should justices themselves earn money off of books that they write, and what does that look like, et cetera, et cetera. But usually we find out about that through the financial disclosures that the justices have. There has been a huge public outcry, and I think we need to continue to publicly talk about this, because it is deeply concerning when we don't know how justices are really making their decisions. Who's controlling it? Who's influencing them? Who are they around? And who's their normal? Where like this is sort of wealth and power going all around it. And so we want to be making sure that the judges and justices in our federal judiciary, especially because they have lifetime appointments, are informed by the facts and the law and the arguments in their courtroom, and not their friends and wealth and power around them. And so the U.S. Supreme Court recently, 2 weeks ago, adopted a code of conduct for themselves. I'll note a few things about it. One, there's no enforcement mechanism. So if we suspect or want to question something, there's no way for us or a litigator or anyone else to question that. Two, there's a lot of language in there that's pretty weak, to be quite frank, that might even do more harm. When this code was announced, the Chief Justice John Roberts, said, hey, this is like pretty much just encapsulating what we've been doing. What you've been doing is not great, so let's not do more of that and codify that, because clearly this misconduct has been allowed to go on. Clearly there's no enforcement mechanism. The other, and I mentioned the recusal, where a judge says, I have a financial interest or a personal interest in this, or there's an appearance of it, I'm gonna step back. There's a provision in that says, but you know what, if there's a circumstance where it makes sense for you to listen, go ahead. So it overrides any of the other ways in which a judge would normally, or a justice would normally say, I should sit out of this. So there's just so many ways, and there's other ways in which it's not strong. So we have, amongst ourselves at the Leadership Conference and the Broad Civil and Human Rights Coalition that we have the honor of convening, have been calling for an enforceable code of conduct. Congress can pass one. It is within their constitutional authority to do so. They should have stronger recusal and transparency measures. And it's still important for the Senate Judiciary Committee and the House Judiciary Committee to provide oversight into this, so we see these problems for what they are and get truth in that. So the Supreme Court, I think, I want to note is a good thing. They're hearing from us. They see the pressure. We need to keep that up. So maybe they'll do more good things, but what they did was not enough and possibly harmful, because people are thinking, okay, they did something, but they didn't do something very good. So we need to keep that pressure on.
Thank you, Lena. Monica, I'm going to come back to you. That's an issue, right? If you don't feel as though the judges who are dispersing justice on you are ethical, that's an issue. Monica, where Pennsylvania, last census tells us that 26% of Pennsylvanians consider themselves a person of color. And it's really important that we see our reflection in the courts, right? We talk about this reflective democracy. I want to see my reflection in the courts. The community that you serve. Talk about why it's important for them to see the diversity on the bench. When we talk about ethics, when we talk about impartiality, why is it important for your community to see themselves represented in the justice system?
Number one is so that they have faith in it and they believe in it. Because the way that it is now, it's intimidating, it's scary, and based on their behavior, people can be very doubtful that these people are really trying to live out for the benefit of anybody except for themselves. So I think that's really important. I think the other thing is that, when I think about when the Constitution was written, it was a really long time ago. And so things have changed since then. I mean, the way people move around, those types of things. And so I think that every day we're learning something new, or there's something new happening. And if we don't have folks that have the understanding of different cultures and of different people to help interpret some of that stuff, but then they're in charge of, in some sense, punishing people, it just doesn't make sense. It's not a reflection of what we are. We have, I gave a statistic earlier of just the Latinos here in Pittsburgh, but there's over 1 million Latinos in the state of Pennsylvania, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I'm sorry, get it right. And what is our representation? Right, right, exactly. So it's really important for that. And I'm obviously Latina, and so I speak a lot about that, but I work with a lot of other communities as well. We have a large refugee community here, folks from like Nepal and from other areas, and it's the more I go down the list, less and less that there is representation.
You want to answer that same question for the community that you center with One Hood Power? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too, Miracle.
Representation is needed because you have to understand where communities are coming from. When I was in court, you go up to the judge and you start making your case. I would have judges who would see me argue all day, ask if I was a defendant. Like after we came back from lunch or we took a break. When the judges do not see you, they see the statistic. They see the number. And it's easy to send someone to prison if they're just a number. It's easy to be like, oh, I've heard this story before, and I'm dismissing this case. And we see that a lot of times, especially within housing justice, of how our judges don't see these communities as valuable. So it's okay, we're gonna evict this community, we're gonna shut down this neighborhood, we're gonna have this pipeline. And it's like, people live here. People are impacted. You can't sit there and say you don't see value in them and then make these rulings. And what's even, I think, more challenging is we're starting to see representation, but representation being used to weaponize rulings against communities. And so we fought for representation, and it's like, oh, you're still doing harm? That's not why you're there. That's the other side of it. But I think about, if you ever go down to the courthouse, it's just right off Grant Street, you probably will not see interpreters already there. Language interpreters, ASL interpreters. You probably will not have people explaining things to you. I went to law school and I didn't study Latin, and I know sometimes when you're reading these cases, and it's like, what does this mean? Like, what are these terms of art? You don't have anybody explaining this stuff to you, and so you're literally sitting there in a courtroom not built for you with people who don't see you. And now we're frustrated that people don't have faith in our judicial system, but our judicial system has not done anything to be welcoming, open to the community. Like, why do we have 8 a.m. court sessions? Like, first of all, like, who wants to be up, like, at 8 a.m. making these arguments? Like, this is not okay, right? And so we saw during COVID, they didn't even want to have Zoom court, because they didn't want people to watch what was happening within these courtrooms. They didn't even want stuff to be live streamed because they didn't want people to see what was happening in these courtrooms. And then what we get is these high-profile cases where then judges are petitioning to become commentators, and so then people, again, do not feel comfortable about these judges because what they're seeing is a show or a farce, and that becomes a problem. And so the representation is a huge, huge, huge issue, and especially as we're becoming more diverse, we're seeing a lot of people trying to write these last-minute laws to harm us even further and codify that pain and that violence into these judicial codes. And so it's going to become an even bigger battle in the next 5 to 10 years.
Ooh, how are we feeling right now? Yeah, some truth being told up here on the stage tonight. You know, it's interesting. Miracle mentioned housing, right? It's like one of the number one topics, particularly here in Pennsylvania, affordable housing. And, you know, how do you have trust in the judiciary? How do you vote for a judge? How do you vote for a senator who's going to put a judge on a bench when you have insecure housing, right? Like you're more worried about where you're going to live than who a judge is going to be. So I want to bring this back for a second because we have another statement from Senator John Fetterman, and he had this to say. I'm excited that Senator Casey and I have kickstarted the application process to fill important judicial vacancies in the Eastern and Middle Districts of Pennsylvania. And I'm grateful for the work of the Leadership Conference, New Pennsylvania Project, and One Hood Power are doing to advance justice and to build a judiciary that reflects the diversity and strength of our Commonwealth. This year, I'm proud to have partnered with Senator Casey to nominate 2 excellent candidates to our federal bench, Judge Julia Munley and Magistrate Judge Carolyn Mahalchik. Did I say that? Yes. And I know that with the incredible work done by the groups hosting today's event, we will continue to be able to put forward nominees who understand everyday challenges facing Pennsylvanians and make equal justice a reality. That was U.S. Senator John Fetterman, your own senator here. And Lena, I just want to ask you, what's going on on the courts right now in Pennsylvania? What could we be doing? Like, who's going through the process? What are the vacancies that currently exist in Pennsylvania? And what do we need to know? Because it's my understanding that the previous president of the United States was one of the most successful in history at appointing judges and justices and putting them on a bench for life. So tell us where we are currently in the standings and what's Pennsylvania looking like?
Yeah, so as of today, and this week there's going to be a few more, which I'm delighted by, but we need a lot more. There have been 156 lifetime confirmations under the Biden administration. By the end of the previous president's 3rd year, there were 188 confirmations. But I think more importantly, let's talk about he was able to get 234 in his 4 years on the bench. We need to do everything we can to close the gap in a number of ways. It's not just numeric, because what we're dealing with the 234 judges appointed by the previous president is many of them came in because of the work that they did to dismantle the Voting Rights Act through their previous legal advocacy, to dismantle the right to abortion, to go in and have a very specific view of the Second Amendment. They were very much going in, quite frankly, with an agenda. That isn't something that's hidden. The president, the candidate, Trump, campaigned on it. It was part of his campaign promise. He came up with a Supreme Court shortlist and said, this is what these folks are going to do. They're going to rip away the Affordable Care Act. They're going to criminalize abortion. They're going to X, Y, Z. What I think I want to really commend this administration doing from the get is saying, we think that these lifetime judges are a priority. It is a president's legacy. It is a senator's legacy. This lives beyond their 6 years in office, or how many ever years these U.S. senators get reelected. It lives beyond the up to 8 years a president can serve. They often are serving on these courts for decades. So President Biden, before his inauguration, his White House counsel they're the ones who do all this vetting, sent a letter to all senators saying, we need you to act fast. We need you to find representative of communities, that is demographically, but also legally in the profession, different types of practice areas for these seats. Of the 156 confirmations, nearly half have significant experience in civil rights law, or they've been public defenders. That is significant, because it doesn't necessarily, it is so important to walk into a courtroom and feel like you are seen, you can see your community. What helps is when somebody has lived that, or professionally as well, has worked with community. So here in Pennsylvania, I do really want to commend, there have been some recent confirmations thanks to the selection in advocacy of Senators Casey as well as Senator Fetterman to get great folks, particularly in the Eastern District, which quite frankly, there's just been more vacancies. So yay, Philly. But here we're in Pittsburgh and haven't had that opportunity, so we'll talk about what we need to do. But there have been a significant number of people with public defender experience on the bench. I also want to highlight that now Judge Cindy Chung, who's been nominated and confirmed to the Third Circuit in Pennsylvania. I will say, Khadija knows this well, during the final 2 years of the President Obama's administration, we would have already had the first woman of color to serve in Pennsylvania on the Third Circuit with Rebecca Haywood's confirmation, but she was held up. But Cindy Chung is now serving in a Pennsylvania seat on the Third Circuit. She does come from a prosecutor's background, but I want to note that she was responsible for the early stages of the charges for the monstrous act at the Tree of Life Synagogue. She was one of the first people to charge a hate crime act and go in on that. So understands how important these civil rights laws are and goes in and does that. And I think that that is significant that you have senators who are looking for that type of experience, but it is still so important to have more public defenders, more people with labor law experience and economic justice issues, more people with immigration law experience, and so much more on the bench. And so here's what I think it's really important to do, and we've already celebrated Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, but we're going to keep doing it because it's important. It's important because that's the type of image I think we need to see reflected at all levels of our judiciary. And the senators here are doing a pretty good job, but we need to keep it going. As Senator Fetterman noted in his quote, there are 2 vacancies right now, one in the Middle District, one in the Eastern District. But what you all in Pennsylvania in the western side of the state can be doing is a few things. One is talking to the folks in your community about this. What does this mean? You can also talk directly to your senators and representatives to say, what are the values you're seeking when you're putting somebody on the bench? What help do you need? Who do you consult? Who's on this commission? Is it reflective of the community that you want to see? And if not, press them on that. Hey, is there anyone from this part of the community or someone with this type of experience helping you evaluate these folks who are coming through? The other thing you can do is when there is a nominee, whether it's in the Commonwealth or not, you can talk to your senators about that. There is going to be a fantastic judge, hopefully soon in the Fourth Circuit, who has significant experience as the general counsel of the SEIU, a huge union, someone who's also worked at Planned Parenthood. How are they going to help support her get across the finish line and become confirmed? What are we going to do? There's a Third Circuit judge, the nominee right now for the Third Circuit, so that's your circuit, but nominated for a New Jersey seat. And we feel what we want about Jersey. It's going to be important to all of you here in Pennsylvania because that judge will be hearing cases that impact most directly cases that come through the Commonwealth. And that nominee is Adil Manji. He will be the very first, which is abysmal, but I want to celebrate it because we need to celebrate any time a barrier is broken, the very first Muslim federal appellate judge. We've only had 3, there's about to be, I think, 4 district court judges that have ever, and it's all happened in this administration, but the first federal appellate judge to be Muslim. And he has significant experience also in civil rights. That's important. So there's a lot you can do to be even looking at some of these judges and these profiles and asking your senators, what are you going to do to help on that? We've talked about ethics too. You can talk to them about that. It's really important to, I think, have these conversations with your community, with your electeds as well. But talking to them, because I do think this representation matters, but what aspects of the community are being represented? What aspects of the legal profession? We need miracles on the bench, which it kind of works in all the ways that I mean it. We need like people who have this experience as a lawyer who have worked with the community, who've had to wake up and do those 8 a.m. arguments, fighting for someone to stay in their house, to have that type of person who really understands it on the bench and making sure that that's what you're communicating is your expectation for your electeds.
All right, thank you, Lena. So Lena kind of gave us the call to action. We wouldn't be organizing groups up here if we're not going to talk about a call to action, because there has to be some kind of movement that happens. Barrett Rustin said the proof one truly believes is in action. So we're going to have to get active. So I want to get to Monica. Yeah, add to that.
I was just gonna, because I'm an organizer in my heart. Yes, to everything that you said. And there's two things that I would add. Number one is that we all know somebody in Philadelphia, whether we like it or not, right? Whether we want to admit it or not. I love Philadelphia, folks, don't get me wrong. But, and so maybe some of the things that we've said here today is kind of like preaching to the choir. But number one, the choir always needs practice, right? And number two, don't keep this to yourself. Take this out of this room, out of these four walls, and share it with as many people as you possibly can. Your neighbor may know somebody in Philadelphia. Your neighbor may know someone in Central PA. It doesn't matter. Just please share what you've learned here today, because it's what she said, we need miracles to happen. And it's not going to happen if this information stays in these four walls. And the other thing I tell people all the time, because a lot of people are intimidated to call their elected officials, and so I'm like, well, I was sitting there thinking one day, you know what? You can call after 5 and leave a message. They get the messages, right? So do that. If you feel intimidated or don't whatever, that's fine. But they need to hear your voice. I have a friend of mine that works at a local elected's office, and she tells me all the time, you won't believe who called and said what today, right? But they take every single call very serious, even if they're complaining about a dog that was barking too loud, right? So if they're getting calls about dogs barking too loud, why can't they get a call about what you want to see as a representation in your community?
So I was going to ask you that question, so I'm going to go back to you, Monica, right? So, I want to hear from you, I want to hear from Miracle, what is the call to action that you believe needs to occur? And then is there anything that, that you want that maybe I haven't asked you tonight, or I wouldn't ask you, that you'd like to mention before we get into Q&A? We're about to break it out to Q&A for everybody here in the room. So anything that I missed that you'd like to share, and any other additional actions you'd like for people to take?
Those are my calls to action. Please take what you have learned here and share it loudly and far as possible. It's very important. And please vote in every single election. There are many people that live here in your community that aren't eligible to vote. And they depend on you to do that for them. And so let's show up for them, for those people that really need us in these really drastic times.
I co-sign that, right? Because as someone who's leading a voting rights organization, we're talking to people who are not eligible to vote all the time. And they live here, and they're paying taxes, they got kids in school, you know what I mean? And so if they can't vote, and we as citizens have the right to vote, we have to take some onus on that for the community, for the beloved community, right? And so if you're not going to vote for yourself, if you're not going to vote for your family, vote for someone who does not have the right to do so, to make these decisions. So Miracle, anything I may have missed out you want to talk about, and what is the call to action?
I just have a few things. Pennsylvania is one of the few states where if you have a criminal record, you're able to vote. You're not able to run for higher office because a judge said that felons can't do that. So if you want to talk about why it's important to elect judges, that is another, I'm going to wrap it up with some happiness too. There'll be some good things. But also, our district, we're interviewing a magistrate judge on the federal level. So that is not necessarily like a district court judge, but the magistrates here, they look at people who are filing pro se. So that is someone who doesn't have an attorney. They're looking at some of the appeals cases. They'll also look at some fights around like bankruptcy. And so we do have magistrates who are people who are going through that process. I think it started a couple of weeks ago. So that's a thing to get involved in. Also, do court watch. If you have, a few spare hours of time during the day, just take your ID down to Grant Street. Please don't wear metal because you have to go to the metal detectors. But go and watch some of these federal trials. They are very interesting. A federal trial was the first time I realized like how the government uses surveillance and how they can track your. I was like, what is happening here? And it was a bank robbery case, and they were just talking about how they found this bank robber by pinning his cell phone and where he traveled from the time he left his house to the time he he got convicted. The time he robbed this bank, and I was just like in shock because I didn't even understand like how all of this stuff worked. And so literally it's I know like C-SPAN may not be like the best use of your time. They may not be the most exciting thing, but sometimes watching these federal trials, they're very, very intricate, and the evidence and how people collect and how they make these arguments, it's very interesting. And so I always say just like go and watch, go do court watch. You just learn so much, and then you can also see where the issues are, where we're failing our communities. Because it's like, oh, everyone from this neighborhood is coming through. Even if you just go, we call it city court down here. So even the Commonwealth Court, just go and sit. Like, who's here? Who's not being represented? What questions would you have wanted a judge to ask? And then when you're going out volunteering or talking to people, like, hey, I was in court and I realized if that was you in that seat, you would have asked that question. Because a lot of times you have to motivate people to run for judges and put their names in, because it is a very deeply, deeply personal process. Like, you have to report everything you have done since the age of 18. Like, you pay taxes, who you were married to, where you moved, like your family, like that one cousin you're very embarrassed of, you still have to like put that down on paper. Like it's a deeply personal process, and for a lot of applicants of color, because they have student loans, they're not being considered for these positions. And so they need people behind them to push them, to fight for them, and to write to their senators, also write to your governor's office. And same thing, if you don't want to make the phone calls, because I'm always like nervous when I do, because I used to do like telemarketing, so I hate doing phone calls. You also send emails. You can also, support the post office and write a letter as well, and that also is a way to like engage and to talk. And then also bring your family members, make a day out of it. Go do some court watch. Go learn. Like right now, I keep bringing it up, but like we are watching the Young Thug trial in Georgia, but you're also starting to see on day one, they were like, he said he was paying people millions of dollars for a hit. And he was like, no, he was talking about somebody who had $1 million earring put in his forehead, right? So just how we talk is criminalized. And if people who are not from our communities understand that, we are literally sending people to prison for decades because people do not understand what's happening. Everybody remember Louisiana, the guy said, I want a lawyer dog. And they said, you could possibly want a 4-legged animal who's a lawyer. That is not even a thing that exists. But because we say, I want a lawyer dog, you know what that means. You're asking for an attorney to come. But the courts was like, no, that wasn't sufficient, and you weren't asking for an attorney, right? And so this is why it's so important to be in these courtrooms, to write this stuff down, and to reach out to Lena when stuff happens, so she can make complaints and follow up and put this in reports and advocate, because we have to change. And unfortunately, like, we have to be the change that we seek in this world. We have to, we're impacted, and then we have to like change it. We don't have the luxury of being like, get somebody else to do it. We're the somebody else. And so I think that it's great that we have these events and we share this knowledge and resource, and that's how we make changes. And also, if you know judges, talk to them. Invite them to learning. They can't do like political things, but they can always learn. You can also send judges, information about your community. Ask them if they can come out and tour your neighborhood so they can understand what people are talking about. Because a lot of times you don't have to be from a neighborhood to oversee a neighborhood. You're not required to drive through. Like, you're not required to drive to the Hill. You're not required to see what's good in Homewood. And so a lot of times people have no idea what happens in these communities until somebody invites them out, and then they can say, oh. And that changes, because I've watched judges being like, you're talking about my backyard. That's not a high crime area. You have to prove more for the elements of your case. And I also seen judges being like, that's a high crime area, element proved, next person. And so I think it's like very important, but judges are people. They make mistakes. They can be corrected, and so never feel like you're not someone who is able to have a voice in these conversations and in these rooms.
All right. Before I pass it to you, Lena, groundswell of public opinion is 3 people going to an elected official on the same day, same moment, with the same issue, and they had to do something about it. Get your posse together. Get yourself and 2 friends together, hit up an elected official's office, have a groundswell of public opinion. You can always do other things too, like go to jail, like I've done a few times too. But good trouble, nothing wrong with good trouble.
Except for her.
Yeah. So Lena, fun thoughts for you, anything I may have missed, and a call to action.
No, I don't think we really missed anything. I'm really curious to know what you all want to do. But speaking of curiosity, the one thing I'm just going to say is you don't have to know everything. I think Miracle did a really good job of things that you can do and ways to learn and ways to help others, including judges, learn. So there's a few resources I do want to just let you know. You can obviously come to all of our organizations. The Leadership Conference, we have a website. It's relatively easy to remember, civilrights.org, where you can download some information about the progress that's made, why diversity on the bench is important, information, facts about, the ethics crisis at the court and what needs to be done. You can just check in on some of the progress that's made. You can also reach out to us at any time. But curiosity is really important. Khadita's mentioned that she's been arrested. She's been one of the only people who's been serially arrested over judicial nominees. It's really remarkable. That level of commitment, Khadita's brilliant, as I think we all know. But we all have to ask questions and get to know the process, and that doesn't happen on day one. So you know why you're going to jail that day, because this is happening and it's tragic, and our elected officials need to listen, and they weren't, so she was there to make them listen until she was taken away. But that curiosity can lead you in 100 different paths. You can be a court watcher. If you get lucky enough to be called for jury duty, do that, because that participation is so important. I do just think that there's so many different ways it can go, but you don't have to know everything. You can be curious, you can ask folks, but talking to other people, learning their perspectives is going to be really important. So just do that, and I think you will find you probably already have had these moments of spark of how this is connected to this. The other thing I just want to sort of note, and I think Miracle did a really good job about this, talking to people who might want to be judges. That's at every level. Or if you know someone who knows somebody who would be good, talk to them. Most of my past decade has been trying to encourage, especially people who do not see themselves on the bench, because it has been white and very male and very much law firm or prosecutorial background, convincing them that the U.S. Senate and the public support you and will support you. It's my job to help make really great nominees judges. There's a whole community of us out there. But we have to get good in to get good out. So encouraging folks to do that, because the default of fair, of impartial, is not white, it is not male, and for too long that has been what is considered. We need it to reflect all of our communities, and that's our mission. Our power is not unified under this one monolith. It really needs for there to be equal justice, much more representation. So encourage folks, talk to them. If you think they should be a judge or they might know someone who would be good, getting them in there, because letting people know that you will cheerlead, even if they don't ever see you in them. Most people don't even know I exist or what I'm doing, or our colleagues. But our work is powerful if we do it, and we have to be just talking about it and doing it more and more and more.
All All right, well, that concludes the panel portion of this community conversation. And now let's get to the community.
Yeah.
And I'm sure many of you may have some questions that you'd like to ask. So this is a safe space and we're an intimate group here. So the questions you've always wanted to know, answers to things you've always wanted to know, here's your opportunity. Unfortunately, this microphone doesn't move. So if you want to stand up and if you're able to and ask a question out loud, and I'll repeat it if it's not loud enough. Who wants to ask the first question tonight? Yes.
I want to verify some information first. How many district court judges, was it
677 district court judges. Oh my gosh, I love a quiz. You have no idea how much this makes me so happy, but I want to make sure I get it right, which means I'm about to pull on my reading glasses because I'm reading glasses years old now. So there's a total of 94 districts, yep, and 3 of those districts are here in Pennsylvania. So we are right now seated in the Western District, we have the Middle District, which is in the middle of the state, and then we have the Eastern District, which is mostly Philly. And we have, in terms of circuits, there are, I want to get that number right, just total overall. I got all that, those numbers. Unfortunately, those are the ones in my head. 79, 170, I was like, that's not right. 179 appellate court judges that are active across the country. And those circuits are divided into regional ones. You're in the 3rd Circuit here in Pennsylvania, but there are 13 total. There's that are mostly divided geographically, a few that are based on, one that's really based on the types of cases that they hear, and then DC, we have our own. And they often hear a lot of the constitutional or administrative law cases, and then we have 9 justices on the US Supreme Court.
Now, in the 3rd district, how many people of color?
In the 3rd District, how many judges of color? That is a really great question. I want to make sure, I'm happy to follow up with you. There's active judges, I can only think of 2 in Pennsylvania, there's maybe 1 more. Yeah.
Preparing as an action step.
Yes.
Preparing a list of resumes, turning them over to our senators for when opportunities, openings come up, is a step that we can take locally.
Yeah, you can talk to your senators. I mean, usually you'd want to get someone's permission that you have their CV and resume and you want to hand it over to the senator, and you can encourage them to do the same. Hey, I want you to talk to the senator's office about your interest in this.
Right.
Their staff will do that. But yeah, you can absolutely say, here's the type of people, and here's an example. This is the person that I think you should really be considering. Absolutely. They have a whole different process that they'll probably try to get you through, but that's, chef's kiss, yeah.
Well, I think we have to be proactive now that I have a better understanding in terms of putting people in front of them. Because the 2 names that you read don't sound like people of color.
Yeah, well, Cindy Chung, who's the 3rd Circuit nominee, she certainly is. Oh, Judge Restrepo?
The 2 nominees that was in the federal.
2 nominees mentioned by federal.
Oh, yes, that's correct. There are other Eastern District nominees. Mia Perez, she identifies as Asian American, Black, and Latina. Kelly Hodge, who's a Black woman. Kai Scott, who's also a judge. Excuse me, put the honor on their names. Judge Perez, Judge Hodge, and Judge Scott are all also identified as Black women. So at the Eastern District, they've done a bit of a better job. Ariana Freeman, thank you. Ariana Freeman is also now a 3rd Circuit judge. She was the one who was the first woman of color to be confirmed in Pennsylvania on the 3rd Circuit. Rebecca Haywood should have been the first. She's also from the Pittsburgh area.
And I'll also just say, less than 10% of all attorneys are people of color. Mm-hmm. Pennsylvania is Pittsburgh is the least diverse sector for attorneys in the nation. So our choices in Pennsylvania are maybe not as, Pittsburgh on the western side, maybe not as robust on the eastern side, but they are there. And I would say for any position, whether it's a judicial or state, I've been in meetings where people have like whole dossiers and they're like, appoint this person. And you're just like, wait. Y'all, this is what y'all are, this is the organizing the people folks are doing? Like, they're not even getting confirmed until January, and people will come in with like a whole folder of folks, like, this is what you need in this position, this is who you need to be tip staff. And also, for those of you who are not lawyers, if you're looking for a career, working in the courtrooms is also, we need people in those positions as well. Tip staff, bailiffs. This lady, my neighbor was like, I've been volunteering as a bailiff for years. And I was like, I thought that was a job, but she's just a volunteer. And that's how she makes sure her community is represented. That's like a local court. You can't really do that on the federal level. But also just thinking about, if you're trying to figure out ways that you can be impactful, if you're looking for a second career, a third career, law school is always there. I'm one of those people who will say, like, if you think about law school more than 6 months ago, try to get scholarships, is a little bit expensive, but also working in courts is also another way to be represented, to make sure you can push back on some microaggressions as well. But yeah.
All right, thanks for that question. Anybody else in the room? Question you'd like to ask of the panel? If we don't have the answer, we'll get it for you for sure. Yes.
I have a question for the lady from San Jose.
Okay, yeah.
I'm an immigrant as well, right? And I think I have fear when it comes to this whole system. I did not have a clue about all these steps. I did not even know, besides the Supreme Court judges, that the other ones are also lifetime on the federal level. So I understand the fear. As Miracle said, when it comes to law, most of us immigrants don't understand the thing. So what are ways strategies that you have put in place to make people like myself, that is a citizen, right, that wants to be more involved, but has a fear when it comes to anything law involvement because of what we heard on the news and whatever. What strategies do you think? Because I would say that a group like this would be nice, not only having me as an immigrant only here, but more people there are interested also because we make this for our own. Yeah. So what strategies did you adopt? And it's scary to hear the other lady saying that most of the rights have been taken away from us. We don't even know it. How do you get to kind of know that you're wondering about something? I'll definitely check the website that you have to civilize.org. But how do you even find out? Because when we come here and immigrated, it's the land of freedom, right? And all this, if you know, it's an honor.
Yeah. So first of all, welcome, and we're happy that you're here. And second of all, we do a lot of organizing, and this is why we meet with our elected officials. And like the community that we serve, they've been to Harrisburg, they've been to DC, they've been to their local elected officials' offices, talking to them. We bring them to our communities, our elected officials, so that they can see where the people live and ask them what their needs are. And so we're always doing that, always organizing on any level. We've done a lot of stuff in DC because of immigration law that, we want comprehensive immigration reform to pass. And so it's not going to happen at our city council person's office, right? So we're actively engaging people so that they can learn how things happen here. And it is depressing and it is sad, but I just want to remind you that these laws and things that are in place right now, they didn't happen yesterday or under the previous administration. They've been here for a long time, and they're going to continue to function in a way where people say, oh, you know what, our legal system is broken. It's not broken. It is functioning exactly the way that it was made to function, to continue to oppress our people. And until we realize that, and we change that, it's going to continue to happen. So
Feel comfortable to ask her questions and to learn from her, but she's also going out and bringing them in, that cultural organizing. And so that's also a lot of great things that Monica's doing. And then we'll go to rooms and be like, why am I the only person here? Why am I the only Hispanic speaking person at this table? Y'all need to do better. And so get other orgs to make it better as well. So that's some of the stuff that Monica's doing. She just did. I just wanted to toot that because she didn't put that on there.
Toot, Monica. There was a question here, I thought.
It's kind of a question, but also a statement. Like Monica, my name is Boyd Blankenship. I'm a community organizer with BPEP. And the heart of the matter I see is that everything that you're saying is strategy, right? Okay, so we've got to be strategic as U.S. citizens to protect our rights under the Constitution, or to even try to start getting back our rights. Now, with lobbying, and we know how these PACs are, and you have the lobbyist organizations, how do we take and sort of advocate to the senator while we know that they're dependent on that PAC funding, and they're also sort of like, you know, most of the political system in our higher hierarchy, they're dependent upon PAC funding. So how do we get our residents, you know, like to sort of understand that this is a large fight, and I really need you to get involved. The one thing that I learned about the courts, and in the most easiest layman's terms, is when you think about the courts, it controls every facet of your life. Your money, your house, your family, and even your freedom. So in the simplest terms, if you have to tell someone why you should advocate for this is why. Those 4 things states your existence. So I'm just trying to figure out, how do we get that message across that these PACs got, you know, like we've got to get in between.
I mean, as a 501c4, so put that out there. Money makes the world go round. Like, we just got to be very honest about that. So if you don't have money, you have to have something else. So you have community, you have your voters, you have your stories, you have your narratives. And you also, especially like being a group of artists, you have to give the senators, elected officials a vision to fight for. Because sometimes if they don't know, if they're not experiencing it, they can't understand what you're asking them to do. And then you're able to use that to build a strategy to say, hey, can you add this to the bill? Can you take out this harmful word? Can you call a meeting? Can you have I love a policy hearing. I love when the senators, you know, will call for a policy hearing. That way you're able to have multiple people give a testimony that goes to the official governmental record, and you're able to share your points of view. Also, for strategy, maybe every 3rd Wednesday you go and talk to the elected official. But also their chief of staff. The elected official, but also their chief of staff. And their scheduler. They will put you on the schedule. Because I've done lobbying meetings, and my lobbying meeting was in the hallway. You know, if the lobbying meeting's in the hallway, it's a no, right? You know, if you can't even get into the door, it's a no, right? So you build those relationships. Have your ask. Don't be afraid to ask for anything. And then also reach out to those PACs or those organizations that are working in opposition and try to figure out what their experiences are, and try to figure out if you can get them to change. Because sometimes it's also about just taking out the most harmful language. And a lot of times, like that's usually my ask, like, can you not use this word? Can you not darken, you know, this picture? Can you not use a Black person's face for this, right? So sometimes that's just my ask, right? But for those strategies, like when you don't have money, you have to have some community behind you. You have to say, you know, we're a member organization, and we have, you know, 500 people. We've registered 30,000 voters. We are a force to be reckoned with. To get in the door, and then also have those asks. Because I think a lot of times, and I'll say as Black people, we're just like so happy to be in the room that we just go and we tell our story and we never have an ask. You need to have the ask from these elected officials. You need to read these bills. You can do like Google Translate, and the AI can read the bill to you. If you don't have time to like sit down and underline and highlight it, but that's what you have to do, because those PACs, they hire people to read those bills. They hire people to write those bills and break stuff down. And so you have to do it. Get your community together, and that's what you have to do when you don't have money, is basically power of the people.
Real quick too, I'll just add, I really think, especially when it comes to the courts, I've mentioned a very deliberate agenda that's decades long that has been to curb the progress of the civil and human rights movement. It has been financed. A lot of people will come to us and be like, well, you need to do what they've done. Our power is derived from the people, from the communities, not from the wealth and the corporations that are trying to make sure that free market ideas prevail, which leads to segregation, that leads to the lack of access to public education, and so on. So the one thing, I will just always, I'm so honored to work where I do, because the images of the folks who came together with the brilliance of saying, we need to do this together in coalition. As Miracle said, you bring other people along, and that's where our power is really coming from. And so we have to do it, but we have to go in with us. We can't mess around. We have to be specific where we have something specific to say. The other thing, a wise woman, my colleagues and I just met, her name is Carmen. She drove us here. She was talking, my colleague Cedric did a great job of explaining why we were coming here, and she just distilled it. Our government is made of people. It's people. Our Constitution was created by people. We're all fallible. We all make mistakes. We all do things. But ideally, if you can come on where you want to go, and we can change, and we can build those relationships, as Miracle said, that's what I think can do. But if you just really look at it, these are people. They may not always have the same type of house that you do, the clothes you do, or they live in the same neighborhood you do. But at the end of the day, they are people. And so to me, that really just helps demystify some of this, or not create this you, me, I weird power dynamic, although that I don't want to dismiss that either. But you are the power. You have such an important voice in this, and just knowing you're doing this to build relationships because you want to affect change. So I'm not doubting the role of money. We need it to do a lot of the things that we do, but that's not how our power is derived, and that's not where we get our freedom, and that's not where we get justice.
All right, we got time for one last question. One last question, and way in the back? Yes.
Yes, can you tell me if children, young adults, children, students that are just turning 18 are eligible now for help, how would you organize them around the issues that they have? Because they have so many issues that's impacting them and impacting their communities. How would you go about doing that?
I'm going to take moderator's privilege here, because I do a lot of voter registration. Yeah, right? If I get the team to stand up here, James Bryan, Kaylee, where's Greg back here? Khalif's over here, Gabe's over here. This is the Allegheny County, part of the Allegheny County team. And they're registering young folks to vote every single day. Every single day. It is not just 2 months ahead of an election. We are on the ground every single day. Cold, rain, snow, heat, all of it. And they have been on college campuses, University of Pittsburgh, Chatham, name the others. Carnegie Mellon. Penn State, yep. Where else? Some community colleges here as well, right? Trade schools. Like, wherever young people are, we're going to be to get them registered to vote. And how do you get a young person registered to vote? You just talk about the issues that they care about, and let them talk about the issues that they care about, so that you can bring a common bond to this. These young folks are brilliant. They have access to information I never had as Gen X, right? And if you talk to them like human beings, they will talk back to you like human beings and tell you the issues that they care about, and you will get them registered to vote. This last November election was won by so many because young folks came out in record numbers and they wanted to protect their rights. They came out to protect their rights. And so when you ask them what is most important to them, they will tell you, and then you talk about those things and you get them registered to vote. And so many times they'll say to you, oh, I don't know, maybe I need to talk to my mom and dad about getting registered to vote. You're an adult now, you're 18 years old, you're paying taxes, you're gonna have this student loan debt for a long time. Let's get you registered to vote, make a decision, and make a decision for where you currently live. You have young folks coming from Philadelphia coming to Pitt, and we're trying to get them registered to vote at Pitt because the decisions elected officials are making at Pitt are going to impact their lives while they're in school for 4 years. So to talk to young people to register to vote is just talk to them. Let them talk back to you. They'll tell you the issues that they care about and you can use those. And anybody, Gabe, anybody want to just mention, what's your secret? What's the secret sauce? Start with a compliment. Gabe, what's the secret? It's about fight the power too. And they're a great group to get together to have that groundswell of public opinion, to get 3 of them in a room, talk to elected officials.
Also, Pennsylvania's automatic voter registration was not retroactive. So a lot of people falsely think that they are registered to vote already, and they are not. And so for those of you who do voter registration, Khadijah's team is amazing, but you also have to check, make sure people check, because the way that was rolled out, so we have automatic voter registration, and people go, I have an ID, I can vote, and it's like, no. It is not retroactive, so you still, if you were not eligible to vote, what was it, August? What was the day they announced that?
That was
September, whatever that September day was. You still have to physically vote and go and do the physical application and process. I don't think that has been communicated enough. But so please just let people know that they're not registered to vote, because there were some people who tried to vote a few weeks ago and they couldn't because of that.
And I'll tell you that we have registered as an organization 2 100-year-old women to vote. 2 100-year-old women to vote. One coming out of the grocery store, she was still driving, still pushing a shopping cart. And when we asked her why she never registered to vote previously, she said, no one ever asked me. No one ever asked me. We called her on that day, and we got her registered to vote. So, okay. Did we end on a positive? I think that's ending on a positive. We want to see the Chris DeLugio video. Let's see if it's done buffering back there. Gabe, do I need to go back? Can we get the Chris DeLugio video back up? I'm gonna come there and help. I want you to see that, because this is your elected official here for your House district in this area. And with that, before I get there, I just want to thank the panel here this evening. So Monica, Lena, Miracle, I want to thank the ASL folks here for interpreting, and then we have a team here, videographers working. Thank all of you for coming out tonight and caring about this. This is what is missing. This room needs to be packed next time we come back. This room needs to be packed next time we come back, and we will come back. And it's got to be packed, because more people need to hear the news, right?
Everybody, good evening. Sorry I can't be with you in person. I'm Chris DeLuzio, Western Pennsylvanian, a veteran, voting rights lawyer, union organizer, and my current job and great honor is representing the good people of Pennsylvania's 17th district in Congress. Thank you to the New Pennsylvania Project, One Hood Power, and the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights for inviting me to share a few words with all of you. Thank you for the good work so many of you do. As I say, it's the honor of my life to get to serve, and so many of you I know are serving in your own ways. We got a lot of work ahead of us. We've got to protect our democracy first and foremost. That means defending the sacred right to vote. So many have struggled for. It means strengthening the integrity of our courts and working to restore trust in the judiciary. So survival of our democracy should be a central issue, I think, in American politics. It's not only threatened by guys like Donald Trump and his enablers who tried to overthrow our Constitution, throw out a free and fair election January 6th, but also by these long-term, slow-moving attacks on the rule of law and the right to vote on the very core of our democratic system. Your own poll this year, as I understand it, showed the majority of Americans, most Americans, fear our democracy may not exist in its current form 5 years on. This issue is existential. These attacks on our voting rights, they're not going away. I saw it during my work as a lawyer with the Brennan Center, where I studied voter purges and more. I saw it at Pitt Cyber, where I worked to shore up election security, and I see it in Congress. Let's stay vigilant on defense, but we also have to act. It is time, it is long past time to pass a new Voting Rights Act, John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. It's time to pass the Freedom to Vote Act to strengthen our democracy, and it's time to shore up the right to vote from the ground up, every state all over this country, including right here in the Commonwealth. We need a Congress who will take on these federal problems, who will take federal action. We also need a Supreme Court who actually answers to the people. Current Supreme Court's record, we all know, they've made it crystal clear. They want to impose their right-wing worldview on all of us. Between their disregard for precedent and judicial restraint and their egregious ethical violations, they're eroding confidence in the highest court and courts all over the land. We can't have justices on the Supreme Court who are out there chasing billionaires, skirting the law without consequences. Trust isn't given, we know, it's earned. Every other federal judge has to follow a binding code of ethics. Supreme Court justices should not be different. In Pennsylvania, we've got judgeships we got to fill. Third Circuit Court of Appeals open. A district court judgeship in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania around Philadelphia, been vacant for 2 years. Let's earn back this trust by filling these vacancies with good, qualified, fair-minded judges and justices, committed to defending our liberty, our freedom, the rights of all people from all communities. Let's fill these open federal vacancies. I believe, as I think many of you do in America, that is as good as its ideals and its aspirations, and that requires a court and judiciary and judges that are fair, principled, representative, and independent. Western PA sent me to Congress to fight for them, all of us. It's the work I do every day. I'm proud to be alongside so many of you, so many good patriots who are fighting for this democracy of ours, for our freedom and for our rights.
All right, it buffered enough. All right, so in the words there, let's get busy. We have work to do. So I'll close us out here again. Thank you to our panel, our illustrious panel, all these strong women up here talking about the courts. And I want to make sure you all know that there is lots of swag for you to take home that is free. Take it with you. There's food. Take it with you. And I think there's a clipboard back here, which means that if someone needs to get registered to vote today, we can do that for you. If you have moved and need to change your address, we can do that for you. If you are registered as unaffiliated, in order for you to vote in the April primary, you need to choose a political party of your choosing, so do that today too. All right, so thank you all for being with us. Thank you to the panels, to the hosts, putting this all together, and let's pack this room next time, all right? Thank you, everybody.